Most people, when they hear the word arrangement, think of flowers. But in certain circles with armed guards at every entrance and surnames that open doors governments can't, an arrangement is something else entirely. It is a transaction of power, a negotiation between dynasties, a sentence handed down to people who were never given a vote. Now here is the question I want you to sit with before we go any further. What happens when the most dangerous man in the room is also the one asking you, not demanding, asking in for help? And what happens when the woman he asks is someone who has absolutely no business being in that room at all? This story begins at a subway station. It ends at sunrise with a ring. But what happens in between is the part nobody talks about. The part that reveals something uncomfortable about power, about loneliness, and about the deals we make when we are desperate enough to say yes. Her name is Lorenza, 29 years old, part-time barista, full-time art student. She restores damaged paintings for her thesis. She finds beauty in broken things, which, as it turns out, is exactly the skill set this story requires. Her bank balance, by her own admission, is catastrophic. Student loans, overdue dental work, rent 3 weeks away from being a crisis. She has learned to blend into shadows the way water fills the shape of whatever contains it. Adaptable, invisible, surviving. Here is what she is not prepared for. A man in an impeccably tailored suit appearing outside her subway station with a proposition that sounds like the opening line of a thriller novel. And in that moment, the restoration of her life began in a way she never could have painted herself. New York is a city of 8 million stories, but only a few of them happen in rooms where the wallpaper costs more than a house. Lorenza didn't know then that the car waiting for her was a one-way ticket out of the shadows and into the blinding glare of the elite. She was used to the smell of turpentine and old canvas. Now, she would have to get used to the scent of expensive cigars and old money. The choice wasn't just about the money, it was about whether she could fix something that wasn't made of paint and wood. He didn't need a barista. He didn't even really need an art student. He needed someone who could see what was broken and wasn't afraid to touch it. Inside his estate lay a secret as damaged as the paintings she spent her nights repairing. Walking into that ballroom wasn't a transaction. It was an entry into a war she didn't know was being fought. And as the champagne chilled and the diamonds caught the light, Lorenza realized that some things, once broken, can never be fully restored. But they can be made into something new, something dangerous, something permanent.
One night, a gala, his grandmother's 80th birthday. He needs a girlfriend, specifically a girlfriend convincing enough to derail an arranged marriage to a woman named Valentina from a family with the right connections. The fee? $10,000. She says yes. Now here is where most of us would say, obvious mistake. Red flags everywhere. Who does this? But let's sit with the data for a moment, because this scenario, the intersection of financial desperation, social performance, and proximity to power, is not as rare as you might think. Modern parallel, the architecture of desperation. According to studies on economic precarity in younger generations, nearly 60% of adults under 35 in developed countries report that financial stress actively shapes major life decisions, including decisions about who they spend time with, what rooms they walk into, and what risks they are willing to take. The fake relationship premise in fiction has existed for centuries because it maps onto something very real, the performance of belonging, the presentation of a self that fits a context you did not grow up in. Anthropologists have a term for this: code switching. The ability to adapt your language, your posture, your entire presentation depending on who is watching. Lorenza has been doing this for years. She just never knew she was being paid for it. And then there is the other side of this equation. The man who made the offer. Pietro Gatti, the oldest grandson, the heir apparent, the one who moves through glittering rooms as though they belong to him, because largely, they do. He has wealth, he has power, he has armed security and imported champagne and cousins who speak in careful euphemisms about import-export operations. And he is asking a stranger for help. That detail matters. We will come back to it. Background atmosphere. Setting the stage for the deep dive. Why does a man who has everything need to hire someone to play a part? It's the ultimate paradox of power. Belonging often comes with a script, and when you can't follow the script your family wrote, you hire a professional. $10,000 for one night of perfect performance, a high price or a bargain for freedom? Money, power, performance. In the world of Pietro Gotti, these aren't just concepts, they're the currency of survival. The architecture of desperation isn't just about the money you lack, it's about the roles you're forced to play. And as the gala begins, the lines between the performance and the reality start to blur into one.
The camera follows them through the entrance. Her dress is borrowed. His suit costs more than her car. Every head turns. The lie begins. The cover story is elegant in its specificity. They met 6 months ago at a gallery. He was drawn to her passion for Renaissance painting. She was charmed by his knowledge of Caravaggio. The chiaroscuro, the contrast between light and shadow, was what first connected them. Lorenza has memorized every word of it during the car ride over. The driver did not look at her. She noticed that. What she has not prepared for is how quickly the lie becomes complicated. His aunt, Gianna Rossetti, is the first complication. Beautiful in the way that requires significant money and deliberate maintenance. A smile that arrives at her mouth before it reaches her eyes. She identifies Lorenza instantly, not by name, but by category. A pretty nobody in a borrowed dress, a distraction, a pawn. Then Uncle Marco arrives, mid-50s, silver threading through dark hair. He looks at Lorenza the way a customs officer looks at luggage. Not with hostility exactly, but with practiced patience. "We didn't even know you existed until this week," he says. That is not a greeting. That is a warning. And then Pietro says something that Lorenza will think about later, standing on a balcony with the city spread out below her like a map of everything she cannot afford. "My grandmother sees things. If she suspects this is fake," he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Some consequences communicate themselves. Behind the gold leaf and silk lies a world that doesn't just judge. It dissects. Every glance is a question. Every silence is an indictment. She adjusts the emerald fabric of her borrowed life, feeling the weight of Pietro's hand on her arm. It's no longer just a story, it's a survival tactic. Somewhere in this house, the grandmother is watching. She is the one who sees the cracks in the chiaroscuro, the one who knows that shadows always reveal the truth. The music swells, a grand orchestral wave that drowns out the whispers, but the warning remains. Marco's eyes, Gianna's categorization. The price of entry is climbing. She is the contrast now, the shadow in their light, the one piece of the puzzle that doesn't belong to the box. As she steps back into the light of the ballroom, Lorenza knows one thing for certain. The lie is no longer her cover story. It is her life. And in this world, there are no second acts for those who get caught in the dark. The ballroom doors close behind her. The air in the ballroom was thick with anticipation. Lorenza had prepared for everything except for this. Nonna Rosa is not what Lorenza expected. She is small, barely 5 feet tall, seated in a chair that resembles a throne. 80 years old, a black dress heavy with jet beads, rings on every finger, and eyes that have seen everything. Those same dark eyes as Pietro, watching rooms like this for 8 decades, learning to see beneath the surface. She takes Lorenza's hand. The bones feel fragile. The grip is not. "Lorenza," she repeats. Lorenza tells the truth. "My grandmother was from Naples. She came to America when she was 19. She made pasta with her hands and sang songs in a language I only half understood. She died when I was 12. Napoli," she says quietly. "Beautiful city, dangerous like many things. Who understands that beautiful things can be damaged but not destroyed, that what was broken can be made whole again?" She wants to know if you understand that you cannot rush the work of healing something that took a long time to break. The music shifts, and with it, the world. The pretend becomes something else entirely. Something has shifted in her expression. She is no longer performing. The mask is starting to slip. The danger is how comfortable it starts to feel. How the words you rehearsed begin to sound like memory. How the story you invented starts to feel like something that actually happened to you. How the man beside you, The stranger you agreed to pretend to love for $10,000 starts to look different. This is not a failure of character. This is psychology, and it happens faster than anyone admits. In the center of the dance, the lie and the truth become impossible to disentangle, and somewhere in the shadows, someone is still watching, still seeing everything. $10,000 was the price, but the cost is something else entirely. The unraveling has begun, and beautiful things, they take a long time to break.
The waltz. Bodies don't lie. Pietro leads her onto the dance floor. She has never waltzed in her life. He tells her to follow his lead. Small steps. Just feel the rhythm. And here is what is remarkable. She does. Her body, which has spent 29 years navigating spaces it didn't belong in, which has learned to read rooms and adjust and survive, her body understands what her mind is still arguing about. The music is violins and cellos. The room is turning around them. "Your grandmother insisted on this?" she asks. "Every grandchild," he says. "The waltz, the tango, the foxtrot. She said if you could dance with someone, you could negotiate with them. Both require reading your partner, anticipating their movements, finding harmony in motion. Is that what we're doing? Negotiating?" Something shifts in his expression. "I suppose we are, and I think I may have underestimated my opponent." "I'm not your opponent, Pietro." "No," he agrees softly. "You're not, but you should be." Pause. Let that land. He tells her that his world is not safe for people like her. People who tell the truth. People who haven't learned to bury their hearts so deeply that no one can reach them. Here is the psychological pattern at work, and it is one that researchers have documented extensively. When two people perform intimacy, even falsely, even for an audience, the emotional distance between them collapses faster than logic would predict. Social psychologists call this the misattribution of arousal. The brain, flooded with the adrenaline of a high-stakes situation, attributes the heightened emotion to the person standing closest. 6. But there is something else happening here that is harder to name. Lorenza is not just feeling something, she is seeing something. She is seeing a man who commands rooms with his presence, who is, by every visible measure, untouchable. And she is watching him ask for help, not demand, not manipulate. Ask, with the word, please. That word, in that mouth, from that man, carries the weight of something he has not said to many people. The real story, Nonna Rosa, and the weight of legacy, 10:30-12:30. On the balcony, away from the crowd, Pietro tells her the truth, not the whole truth. Men like him release information strategically, in measured doses. But enough. His grandmother lost her husband 10 years ago. His grandfather built everything, the family, the business, the power, the empire that hides behind import-export euphemisms at dinner parties. When he died, she lost her purpose. For a while, they nearly lost her too. Then she fixated on the next generation, on continuity, on the idea that her husband's legacy would persist through great-grandchildren and arranged alliances and the correct marriages between the correct families. Pietro is the oldest grandson, the one meant to step into his grandfather's shoes, the shoes he never asked for. "You probably think that's ungrateful," he says. "I have everything, and I'm complaining about—" "I think you're human," Lorenza interrupts. "And I think having money doesn't mean you don't get to want things for yourself." She hesitates. Then, "I don't think Valentina is right for you." He looks at her. "You've known me for 4 hours. You'd be surprised what you learn about someone when you're trying to act like you." She stops herself. The word love almost made it out. When you're trying to act like you know them. What did you learn? 7. What she does not say. That you are lonely. That you carry weight you never asked for. That when you think no one is watching, You look at your family with love and frustration in equal measure. That you touch me like you are afraid I'll disappear if you hold too tight. That you are nothing like the dangerous man I expected you to be. What she does say, I learned that you're a good dancer, that you genuinely love your grandmother, that you tip well. I saw you with the coat check girl. He smiles, not the controlled, calculated smile he has been wearing all evening, a real one. It transforms his face. The threat. Gianna on the balcony, 12:30–14:30. When Pietro is pulled away by Uncle Marco, not a request, a summons, Lorenza is left alone, and Gianna Rossetti appears. She has been watching all evening. She has been waiting. Tell me, Lorenza, how exactly does a barista catch Pietro Gatti's attention? It is not a question. It is a knife, delivered with a smile. Gianna lays out the architecture of the deception with clinical precision. Lorenza is a pawn, a distraction, a prop in a family power struggle she doesn't understand. When she has served her purpose, she will be discarded. I've seen it before, Gianna says. All the girls who think they can handle a man like him, they fall, and then they get hurt. I'm not falling for anyone, Lorenza says. I know exactly what this is. Do you? Beat. That's adorable, Gianna says softly. You actually believe that. Here is the uncomfortable truth that Gianna is telling, and the reason this scene cuts so deep. She is not entirely wrong. She is wrong about Pietro. She is wrong about his intentions. But she is right about Lorenza. Lorenza is already falling, and she knows it. Which is why, when Pietro returns and asks if Gianna said anything to upset her, Lorenza says, She told me I was going to fall for you and get hurt. And are you going to fall for me? She should laugh it off. She should remind him this is business. She should protect herself the way she has learned to protect herself, by keeping her expectations small and her exits clear. Instead, she looks at him and says, Ask me again in the morning. What this reveals, the pattern beneath the story, 14:30–16 quarts. Let's step back from the ballroom for a moment, because what is happening here is not just a love story. It is a study in how proximity and shared deception create bonds that logic cannot fully explain. Psychologists who study undercover operatives, people who spend months or years performing false identities, consistently find that the greatest danger is not exposure. It is what researchers call identity drift, the gradual dissolution of the boundary between who you are pretending to be and who you actually are. Lorenza is not an undercover operative. She is an art student in a borrowed dress. But the mechanism is the same. She went into this room performing a version of herself, Petro's girlfriend, confident, belonging, chosen. And somewhere between the waltz and the balcony and Nonna Rosa's grip on her hand, the performance became something else. Not a lie. A question. What if this is who I could be? What if being seen, truly seen, in this room, by this man, by this formidable old woman who already considers me family? What if that is not pretend? End of part 2. The lie is no longer holding, but neither is the distance. Part 3. The reckoning. What the ring means. Target length, 1,200 words. Tone, reflective, urgent, emotionally resonant. The cost of playing pretend, 16 or Yao, 1730. Visual. The city at 4 a.m. Empty streets below. The ballroom thinning. Pietro and Lorenza still together. Narrator. By the time the clocks approach midnight, several things have happened that were not in the original agreement. Nonna Rosa has invited Lorenza to Sunday dinner, not as a courtesy, but as a declaration. She will be free, she says, when Pietro begins to object. A woman makes time for her boyfriend's family. This is how it is. Valentina, the woman Pietro was meant to marry, has spent the evening watching from across the room with barely concealed fury. The arrangement has been publicly disrupted. The families will need to renegotiate. This is not a small thing in the world these people inhabit. Uncle Marco has taken Pietro aside, his expression the expression of a man delivering information that will require a decision. And Gianna has said, on a balcony with a champagne flute and a tone like a eulogy, "I hope you know what you're doing, Pietro." To which he replied, "I always do." To which she replied, "That's what worries me." Here is what worries me, watching this unfold. Not the danger, not the family politics, not even the lie. What worries me is the morning. What happens when the sun comes up and the agreement expires and Lorenza is supposed to return to her peeling paint and her cat and her overdue restoration project and her very real, very ordinary life? Because she has spent one night being seen as someone who belongs in a room she has never belonged in. And the thing about being seen, genuinely, completely seen, is that you cannot unsee yourself afterward. 3 takeaways from a story about a lie, 1730-20 Quao. Let me give you 3 things to carry out of this ballroom. Takeaway 1. Desperation and desire are not opposites, they are cousins. Lorenza said yes to Pietro's offer because she needed the money. That is the simple version. But the fuller version is this. She said yes because she was tired. Tired of blending into walls. Tired of being invisible in rooms she served but never occupied. The $10,000 was the stated reason. The unstated reason was the question underneath it. What would it feel like, just once, to be the woman on the arm of the most powerful man in the room? This is not weakness. This is human. And it is a pattern that repeats across every class boundary, every social gap, every story about someone from one world accidentally stepping into another. The money is rarely just the money. Takeaway 2. The most dangerous lies are the ones that become true while you're not looking. Lorenza told Pietro's grandmother that he made her feel safe, that he listened, that he remembered details from conversations. Every word of this was technically false. She had known him for 4 hours. But here is what she said to herself immediately after. It was all true. She was describing the Pietro from those 4 hours, and those 4 hours had been more real than months of relationships she had actually lived. This is the mechanism of rapid bonding under pressure. Psychologists call it intensity compression, the way shared high-stakes experience collapses the timeline of emotional connection. When she told Nonna Rosa he made her feel safe, she was not lying. She was discovering. Takeaway 3. Power is most visible in what it costs the person who holds it. We spend a great deal of time imagining what it would be like to have what Pietro Gotti has. The suits, the security, the surname that opens doors. The ability to offer a stranger $10,000 for one evening and not notice the expense. But watch what the power costs him. He cannot choose who to love. He cannot disappoint his grandmother. He cannot escape the weight of a legacy he was born into rather than built. He moves through a room that belongs to him, and he is, beneath the marble and the chandeliers and the careful control, alone in the specific way that powerful people are alone, surrounded by people who need him to be a symbol rather than a man. He hired Lorenza because she was the only person in his orbit, at that moment, who did not need anything from him except what he had already offered to give. She was the safest person in the room. For a man in his position, that is extraordinary. The warning. What the ring actually means. 20 Sar 2130. Now, the ring. The title of this story promised you a ring. By sunrise. And here is what I want you to consider before we get there. In the world that Pietro Gotti inhabits, the world with armed guards at every entrance, with families that negotiate marriages like trade agreements, with grandmothers who already call you family after one conversation. A ring is not a romantic gesture. A ring is a decision. A public, permanent, irrevocable declaration made in a context where declarations have consequences, where they restructure alliances, where they protect or expose the people who make them. When Lorenza told Pietro to ask her again in the morning, she was not being coy. She was not playing a game. She was giving herself the hours between midnight and sunrise to decide whether she was willing to step fully into a world she had only been pretending to belong to. And the warning, the thing Gianna said on the balcony that Lorenza should have listened to harder, is this: you cannot pretend your way into a world like this and then simply leave. Once Nonna Rosa has called you family, once you have danced the waltz in front of 200 witnesses, once the family politics have already shifted to account for your presence, you are no longer a visitor. You are a variable, and variables in systems built on power and arrangement do not simply return to zero. The open question, 2130, 2230. So let me leave you with the question that this story is actually about. Not whether Lorenza and Pietro fall in love. That part I think you already know. The body language told you. The waltz told you. The way he said please told you. The question is, what does she choose when she chooses him? Because choosing him is not choosing a person. It is choosing a world. A world with a grandmother who already loves her, and an uncle who already suspects her, and a woman named Valentina who already hates her, and a structure of power that will never, not once, let her simply be Lorenza from the borrowed dress who needed $10,000 for her rent. Lorenza restores damaged paintings. She has spent her professional life studying what happens when you apply careful attention, the right touch, patient work, to things that are broken but not destroyed. The question is whether she is prepared to be restored herself, whether she can let someone see the damage without trying to cover it, whether Pietro Gotti, who has spent his entire life moving through rooms that belong to him, is capable of belonging to someone else. The ring is not the ending. It is the beginning of the harder question. Call to action, 2230, 23. If this story made you think about the lies we perform for survival, about the worlds we walk into and cannot walk out of unchanged, about what it really means to be seen, drop it in the comments. Because this is not just Lorenza's story. It is a story about anyone who has ever said yes to something they didn't fully understand, because the alternative was continuing to be invisible. And if you know someone who is trying to restore something broken, in themselves, in someone they love, in a relationship that looks like it has too much damage to survive, share this with them. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let someone see you clearly, and sometimes it is the only thing that saves you. Subscribe if you are here for the stories that don't resolve cleanly, the ones where the truth and the lie become indistinguishable, the ones that ask more than they answer. We will be back next week with another one. Outro music, slow, cinematic, strings. End of script.